Hi, I'm Christina Southam with the BYU Management Society. We're thrilled to introduce you today to our moderator and panelists. First, the mission of the Management Society is to grow moral and ethical leadership around the world. Today's discussion will be avoiding groupthink. And Jeanette Bennett, owner of Utah Valley Magazine, will be leading that discussion. She has a bachelor's and master's from BYU and an honorary doctorate from UVU. Jeanette?
Well, we're excited for this conversation that we're going to be having today. We have three amazing guests and panelists today that I've been crossing paths with the past few years, and today we're all in the same room by some miracle. Lots of busy schedules, especially with this year of changes and challenges. But I'm excited for our conversation today about how to avoid groupthink, especially with the advantages of diversity, which all three of you had unique experiences and backgrounds in bringing diversity into business settings and nonprofit settings, and so we're going to learn so much today, and I'm thrilled. And we have two guests named Sid, so we can keep it easy. Sid and Emma, and I'll give some brief introductions. You'll get to know them mostly throughout our time together today as we discuss today's topic. But Sid, we'll start with you. Cydni Tetro is a thought leader in STEM and women in technology. Tell us a little bit more about how you got started with that and your background in the companies you've started and run.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, right, STEM, technology is my passion. I've really built my career around how you run companies to build products and introduce them to market. Mm-hmm. And along the way, I also found this passion of how do we increase the pipeline for women in technology. I did my undergrad in BYU in computer science, right, and there was three women.
You did that. That was before you had SheTech and other things guiding you to that.
Yep.
Incredible.
And I think that also kind of inspires that path, because you come through a program, you're like one of three women graduating in computer science, and it gives you this perspective as you enter a career about the types of things and collaboration that you want to create, the type of people that you want to work with, and really how you think about growing career. So I've had the opportunity to be on the company side and also really activate communities around women in STEM.
Mm-hmm. You're a seasoned CEO, leader. I love that you've created SheTech and the Women Tech Council. I have three daughters. I know they're benefiting from the world that you're shaping. So thank you for all that you've done. Our next Sid Krommenhoek, seasoned entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, currently with Album. Tell us a little bit more about Album.
Yeah, so Album VC is a venture capital firm. We focus on early stage investing. So this is when everything from very new ideas that may not have much traction to companies that have some traction, but it's really early. Mm-hmm. And they're looking for both some capital and then, in our case, some guys who've had a bit of experience in operating. My two partners and I all managed from startups to larger companies before we got into this.
Very cool. One of those companies being Zinch.
That's right.
Which I loved following. I think we wrote about you a few times as you grew that company.
Yep.
Very cool. And part of that led you to China.
Yep.
Right? Tell us just a little bit about your journey there.
Yeah, so the company you mentioned, Zinch, we were focused on helping high school students in the matriculation to college, and that introduces a whole new world of challenges and, of course, the opportunity of furthering your education. And so as the business was growing, it coincided with the rise of modern China, kind of the rise of the middle class. And so we had so many students from China using our services that we decided to launch a completely localized version of the website for the Chinese audience. So my wife and I, we both have a background. We served LDS missions. We speak Chinese. We moved to Beijing with our kids.
Amazing.
And had a journey that was filled with all the ups and downs of just kind of life and the challenge of navigating a very foreign country.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And we could probably spend the whole time talking about that, which we can't today, but I'm sure it influences a lot of how you feel about bringing in diversity, other cultures, other thoughts. So we'll get back to that. So Emma Houston,
yes.
We were talking before that you've had a busy year because you're a great thought leader in this space, and people have been wanting more dialogue along those lines. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, yes, again, I am Emma Houston. I've been in Utah since 1986, originally from Texas by way of Florida, Utah. And so my background in diversity, equity, inclusion, all of those words that we're using out there has really come to the forefront now that we're having the social unrest in our communities. And individuals are wanting to have conversation as to what does it really mean.
Right.
Is it just a box that I check to say, yes, we have diverse individuals, or do we have diverse individuals who come to the table with different perspectives? So the work that I do is all about having those conversations, bringing people people to a space where they can be comfortable, where we can have those brave, honest conversations about what it looks like and what it means within each individual organization, but also to our community as well. So my background, my passion, like Ms. Sid said, her passion, what she does in the tech world, my passion is all about those conversations around what diversity really means and how we drill that down.
And one of the things that I love about you is you do this in formal ways, in positions you've had in Salt Lake and other things, but you're also just a leader in this space by virtue of being Emma. You know, and
well, yes. By profession, I work with Salt Lake County, and I was the former Director of Diversity Affairs under Mayor Ben McAdams. Under Mayor Jenny Wilson, she has pivoted to a deeper dive of inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. Bright idea, inclusion, diversity, equity, and access.
I like that.
And has asked me to take the lead in ensuring that 7,000 employees with Salt Lake County understand what that means. Looking through a lens of diversity, how we interact with each other, but also how do we serve the customers with the resources that we provide. So it's a bigger lift within Salt Lake County now.
Oh, well, thank you for all the work that you're doing and what you're going to teach us today. I love that. So let's start with just kind of the broad question of why diversity? Why is it so important? Why are we talking about this today? And what benefits does diversity bring to organizations?
Yes.
So do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, you mentioned Zinch, so I'll just share one anecdote that for us was like this. It should have been obvious, but it was not, and we benefited from diversity. So we were in the business of helping students showcase themselves to American universities. So we had users. We didn't like that word because it can be ascribed to other things, but users of the website and service. So we're building products for them and an experience, and we don't realize until literally years in how high a percentage of our user base was female. It was like 70% at one point.
Wow.
And we're three guys, running this business, building a product for women. You can imagine something, I mean, just try to think of anything you use in your daily life that women are going to know and say men aren't or just aren't in the habit of using it. You would hope that there's a woman who's involved and deeply involved. And so as the story unfolded, we recruited to our team as CEO a woman named Anne. And that was one simple thing that made a huge difference was we just actually had somebody in a senior position who could empathize with a portion, in this case, the majority of our audience. So when you think about your audience, chances are your audience, unless you're selling a very, very niche product for a set of people, it includes a spectrum of people. And the question then becomes kind of, are you equipped as a team to really understand the needs of your customers, say, in a business setting?
So it's not just optics. We need a woman for the homepage. You need a woman for her input and ideas for your customers.
That's right. Because I think the instinct sometimes is, well, let's market it right. And we've all seen now, whether it's the right billboard, we're like, oh, they placed the perfect Hispanic, Black, white, and racially ambiguous person and gender. And we're like, they got it, but we can't just check that box because behind the facade is the substance, and you either have it or you might be lacking.
Right, absolutely.
Well, and Sid, I think that's why we actually talk about diversity with inclusion, and what we're seeing is a lot of companies moving inclusion first, because diversity in of itself doesn't actually solve the problem. What it is this mindset of how do you include all of these different backgrounds that people come from, life experiences that they bring to the table, in addition to socioeconomical or ethnic backgrounds as we come together. Because the key to solving or to avoiding groupthink is actually in how you embrace what someone else says. Right? Because it's oftentimes easy to say, okay, let's add a female to the mix. It's not in the adding the female to the mix. It's actually in the listening. And it's this ability to make sure that you hear my voice, we hear someone else, we understand their perspective, and whether or not we decide to go that direction is actually irrelevant. That it is about the environments that we create for safe conversations. And I think that's what changed, right? You had this group of people who not just added a female leader in, but who said, wait, we're going to listen, we're going to evolve, and we're going to understand how we move forward. And we're hearing from tech companies, a lot of them changing their DEI and D&I groups to say, like, we're leading with inclusion first. And we're going to lead with inclusion. And in certain companies, allyship is really at the forefront. And then, we obviously have equity and access and diversity, but it's actually behavior that must change. It's not about just the players on the table.
Yeah.
That is so true. One of the things that we discovered during this entire COVID pandemic is that the information we were sending out was not reaching diverse languages and diverse cultures. And all of the flyers, all of the social media platforms were speaking to any individual who spoke English fluently. And so when we looked at our refugee community, when we looked at our New American community, we said, they don't even understand what we're talking about because we're speaking it in our language. So how do we navigate that space? And I said, they don't understand. That is not the correct term. Excuse me, I should not have said they don't understand. What we did not do correctly was provide information to communities who were not proficient in English, who did not live here in the United States as their first native born.
Their language.
We needed to speak different languages, and we needed to be able to speak to the leaders who were a part of those communities to say, what are we missing, and gather from them what it's all about. So when you're talking about inclusion, we're talking about from the front door to the back door and all in between, not just the physical part of inclusion, but also the culture and the lived experiences of it. So that brings different thought processes to the spaces, different perspectives to the spaces, and that's where the inclusivity comes in.
So when you're training these companies in Salt Lake and beyond about inclusion, what do you tell them that word means, and what do you find is difficult for them in implementing inclusion?
When I'm doing trainings and having conversations with individuals, we start talking about inclusion, what they're saying is that, no, we're a friendly place. We welcome everyone. And my question to them is very basic and very simple. Do you greet everyone? That's the very first part of creating a space of inclusivity as well as belonging.
Do you greet everyone?
Do you greet everyone that walks into your space? That is part of your corporation, your business. So, and I mean that by if I walk into your organization, your business, and you do not greet me as a client, as a customer, as a potential employee, then that is not an inclusive space. And we have to reach. So some of the very small, simple steps that we take, if you set the tone of being welcoming, the first thing is greet someone. Call them by the name they want to be referred to as. Please don't change people's names because we have often given people shorten their names because I can't pronounce it correctly. So I'm going to give you another name so I am more comfortable. So it's just some of those very small things that you'll look at. And inclusivity talks about how do you make an individual feel welcome when they walk into that space. And can we understand that our biases and our lived experiences play a part in how it's going to be a positive or a negative experience.
Wow. So that's something so small, but it sets the culture.
It sets the culture.
Like, do you greet them initially, but also are you greeting the whole part of them along with all their ideas?
What they bring to the table.
Yes.
Can I bring my authentic self to this space? And you respect who I am from my lived experiences. And so that's what inclusivity, that is how I explain it to individuals. You start at the very smallest degree, and then you raise it, where everyone is mirroring what you want the organization to look like.
I love that. Thank you.
Can I ask a question about that? You know, we're in this midst of this pandemic. We have lots of companies who are working virtually, and lots of companies who are not going to go back into physical offices. How do you, in the example that you just gave, like what thoughts have you had about how we extend that kind of greeting mentality, which is really about the acknowledgement of all of the individuals? Like, how do we do that even better in these virtual environments where sometimes it's hard to be the one who speaks up, or you don't have the same like walk through the door and see someone?
Absolutely. I think when we're talking about building those relationships, what relationships do you have with your colleagues? And it's about, can I pick up the phone? I know Emma is a black woman in this society. I know what is going on within our community is challenging for certain communities. I am going to reach out to my Emma Houston and just check in on her. I'm just going to touch base with individuals that we know may be having some challenges at this moment. Not to single the black brown, indigenous, people of color out, but to show that there's some empathy going on, that I am aware of what's going on in this community. I just want to let you know that I am here, that I empathize with what's going on, and if there's ever an opportunity you want to have a conversation, I just want to let you know that I am here. And each person can do that and start building that relationship, because that virtual thing, if someone reached out to me virtually to say, I have taken the time to get on another Zoom, on another WebEx, on another, I have taken the time to virtually reach out to you, you are setting the tone as to how you are mirroring that either on site or virtually. You're still connecting with individuals.
True, and Sid brings up a good point. This year has been full of challenges.
Yes.
COVID is a major challenge in many ways. Yes. What are some other challenges in companies and individuals implementing diversity and inclusion? What are some of the roadblocks to this being the perfect ideal world we all envision? COVID's a current one. What are some other barriers that you find?
Well, I think what Emma just said is often what we see is oftentimes there's not intentional things that happen. Right. They were unintentional, and we have to move to this framework of everything we do has some intentionality and empathy. I think the thing that we most often miss is, first of all, we're not going to get everything right. Right, so we need acknowledgement on both sides that we're on this learning path, this journey together of all becoming better. But it requires this huge amount of empathy to say, like, I can appreciate where you come from, and you can appreciate that I'm not perfect, but that I'm trying in this journey. Mm-hmm. And then if you can do that and then be willing to take down these filters that you might have had that are just biases that we grew up with, and figure out then your policies and procedures that have to change. We've seen really simple things like, hey, let's run our job descriptions through decoders that tell us if they have bias in them, whether it's gender or person of color. Hey, let's think about what our interview panels look like. Mm-hmm. When someone comes in, like, how many different people do they interview with, and what perspectives do they gain from what those look like? And even those foundations of understanding the needs of each group. Like, we know for women in tech, that when they rank companies they want to work for, equity and pay are always, like baseline. We got to figure those out. Mm-hmm. But the next one they go to is this term that they talk about is flexibility. Mm-hmm. And flexibility for them does not mean I work less hours, but it means that the culture is okay, that it manages me by what I do and the achievements that I must finish to get my job results. Done. Mm-hmm. That's right, but my accountabilities, and not by this checklist of things. For a lot of companies, that's really hard. For them to say, oh, you weren't sitting in front of that Zoom camera for 8 hours and I didn't see you. Well, it used to be, at the desk. Right. But now you're on the Zoom camera. And that flexibility note for women, that's a big driver for them. So when you think about how you make sure you have environments that can support diversity, it means thinking deeply about how does our culture support people who aren't here. Mm-hmm. Just one quick story. I was talking to a Fortune 20 company the other day. And they said, Sid, for the first time, now that COVID hit, we hired someone on our executive team who wasn't located at headquarters. Mm-hmm. First time. And that is enabled because of the world we live in today, where we know if I'm not in the same room, I can still have value. And if I'm doing and working in a slightly different way, which I think opens up so much power in building diverse teams. Absolutely. I think it unlocks so much for women who need this entire different perspective. But it is a complete disruption to the way many organizations have been built for decades. Yeah. But everyone got forced to the same game. Yeah. Right? We all got forced. Yeah. And the companies that embrace that will actually end up with more diverse teams and success. That's right. I really believe that.
And that's happened right here in all of our backyards. So there's a company that's been just iconic in their rise, that the exact thing happened, where now the applicant pool was like, you know what? The whole notion of like our executive team needs to be together has kind of changed, at least in the short term. So I think there's something during COVID where I've called it like it's kind of our mulligan year. Like it's our year. It's like, you know what? It was COVID. Like if there's any problem in your life for something, it's like, yeah, it was COVID. It was 2020. You remember that year. But it's also kind of the time when you get an extra shot on goal with things like this. You can say, you really can. You have, I don't want to say an exodus in our case from kind of Silicon Valley in tech, but you do have a higher number of executives who are, even if in the short term, saying, you know what? I think Montana looks a lot prettier right now, during this.
Mostly they're saying Utah.
Mostly they're saying Utah. Yes, sorry. Yes.
That's fine.
Yeah, but it hits on what I think is, to me, the elephant in the room with, and very conspicuous elephant in the room in the companies that I work with, which is at these senior levels, the C-suite, if you do not have diverse people, like, you know, on one hand that with all the investment banks moving toward the requirement that there be at least gender diversity, you have to have at least women or we are not going to take you public. Like, there's kind of that out there, and they know in the background, like, we can't just all of a sudden, months before we go public, oh, and we're adding a woman to the board. They understand and can grok that that's too little too late, and not just looks bad, but just is bad. Like, you're not really valuing it for what it is. But that's the hard thing right now, I think, you know, is to say, like, even our own firm, if I look at it, we've become I have 2 partners, right? There's 3 of us. As we added a Brazilian to our general partnership, if you just look, and I had no idea, but if you just look at the deals from Fund 1 to Fund 3, they've gotten more diverse heavily in the Hispanic category. Like more than a quarter of our founders are now Hispanic, and I don't think it's magic. It's not that we're saying, where are those Hispanic innovators? It's just what we look like, and we naturally empathize with it. Now, the next argument is, you know, well then, if you want to back more women, what might you be doing? And that of course stares us in the face, and we have to answer to that. But yeah.
And your network changed, right? As you add the diversity. The other thing that I think is powerful is you get a different network of people because they know a different community.
Totally.
Yes. And so you don't just get the diverse thought, but you get this community that I think creates influence.
That's right.
And you're like, oh,
That's
I
right.
didn't think about it that way, or I should think more this way.
That's
and so
right.
I think that naturally creates trajectory because you're intentional in the beginning, and then there's all of these things that I think happen.
Totally agree. Go ahead, Emma. No, Emma, please.
No. I want to piggyback on something both of our Cydni said in regards to that, but that deep dive when we're talking about policies and procedures and practices. I was asked to look at several of our job descriptions in our HR department through a lens of diversity and inclusion and equity and access. As I'm reading the words, I'm thinking, oh, this is so exclusionary. This is so, when we use the words top talent, and you go on someone's website, and you see who represents them, you then get a visual picture of what top talent is. And if you come from a community from a diverse background and you're not pictured in that top talent photo on your website, on your social media pages, top talent is code word for but not you. Even if you have the credentials, even if you have the skills, the background, the talent, if you look at some of the words we're using in our job descriptions and our policies, procedures, it's exclusionary. And when we're talking about doing the heavy work, we have to start internal. And that's what Mayor Wilson is saying. We need to start internal of what we're doing and how can we make this happen. But also when we're talking about an ally, you either have an actor, an ally, or an accomplice. And an actor will stand by and watch the show, will simply watch the show. An ally will understand what you're talking about and want to amplify and also want to encourage a change. But an accomplice is going to go alongside someone to say this needs to change. An accomplice is going to use their voice, use their power, use their position to say, have you looked around the room for the lack of diversity that is in our spaces? So it just depends on where you're willing to do the work and when are you ready to do the work. And when you look at your board, when you look at your C-suite, when you look at your executive teams, if they nod and say, yes, we're ready to do it, but they're not, but yeah, we're it's scary work.
Right.
It's a heavy lift.
It is.
It's hard.
And it has to have 100% buy-in. And we have to be courageous enough to lose some people.
Well, the mayor's lucky to have you. I'll have to remember the AAA. So it's a good self-check. Which one are you? Actor, ally, or accomplice?
You know, and there are days where I am every last one of them. It just depends on the situation.
Right.
It depends on my comfort level. It depends on all of our comfort level. And we elevate ourselves to be that accomplice. We start out as actors, but we elevate ourselves to be an accomplice.
Well, and that makes a great point. We can change, right? And that's the whole point. Changes need to be made, and we can do that.
Absolutely.
Well, and actually, I like what you just said, too, because sometimes I think we get fearful that if everyone doesn't see us always as an accomplice, that we're not doing the right things. Yes. And I think that's also part of that empathy, that there are certain things that some of us are better at being the accomplice for, and some we are going to be an ally, and it's actually okay. Right? Do you agree with that?
Absolutely,
that it's okay?
I agree. Absolutely.
Because I think we've felt that sometimes there's a lot of judgment if we're not always on one end. And I think we need this continuum to like not just be on a journey, but also be okay sometimes that in this topic, I'm going to be really great here, but on this one, I can be an amazing, accomplished champion.
And we have to own that. And when we have other people put labels on us, I thought you were my ally. I am, but on this situation, I'm the actor. So allow me to be the actor in this space. Let me help you find the ally you need who is better to equip you to move forward. So we have to own where we are and be comfortable with where we are, but also call people in when they label us in a negative way. Don't call nobody out. Call them in. And when you call someone in, you're educating them.
Right.
When you're calling someone out, you're chastising them. So we have to recognize the words and the languages that we use. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I think this year we've noticed a lot of problems, right? But I want to focus on the positive as well.
Yes, positive.
So let's focus on a few things that you've seen. I'd love to hear stories or anecdotes about what is going well in this space with diversity and inclusion. What have you seen that's actually we've really improved during your careers?
Let's see, now that you added our whole career, but I'll give you an example of something that I think is improved. I was just talking about this earlier today. So in the Women Tech Council side, as the pandemic hit, we took the opportunity to start doing these weekly advisory board calls. And every week, we would have companies or women who are on, or men on that advisory board share either how they were handling things, what their company was doing, what the needs of their community were. Like this really became this really rapid place. You sat in on some of them over time.
Valuable and interesting. And a wide range of things, business and personal.
Yeah, business, personal, and company. And what we found is, and one of the things that I think has really unlocked this year, is that we have this amazing group of people who are willing to share for the intention of helping and lifting others, right? And when you activate them in the right community, the right ways, that they show up, and even we had a call, we still do these calls, we've moved them to monthly. We had this call in September, and these companies came on and they shared what had happened since the last 4 months that they shared. And we all walked away just amazed and like, I need to go do that in my company. Or wait, why we need to add to that. Or that was the impact and result of what you did. And that sharing, I think, is what makes us better. This ability to be open to, it doesn't matter that my company might even compete with you. What matters is that we're trying to care about people, we're trying to care about our livelihoods, trying to care about economic impact and the mental health of all of these people, because all of those aspects of our lives are disrupted. 2020 is super hard.
Super hard.
Right? And it's not ending tomorrow. And so you need these people around you where, like, oh, thank you for sharing that. We should apply that to my company. And what we learned is their willingness to share made everyone else implement those. Like, they just stood up and said, we're trying this. And someone's like, I'm going to go try that right now. Oh, that was a great idea. Let me try that. That is the power of community, and that's why we can't be competitive. And I believe that's a huge part of inclusivity, that we look at each other and we say, we're all trying to help each other. We're trying to become better. We're still capitalists. We're still building businesses. We still have to pay for people. But at the end of the day, it's about the impact we make on people and community and the reach that we have on that. And I think we have learned that we can bring communities together to do that.
So that's a positive spin on GroupThink, is when we can share, right? When groups get together and they're vulnerable and they say, this is what's going well, this is what I've learned, and then we allow each other to piggyback on our best practices. I love that.
I think it's been amazing. Like, there's times when you're literally brought to tears by what people say on that call, and you're like, thank you for being willing to like share what you're doing and how much you care about people and how rapidly you're willing to adjust. Because if you weren't willing to adjust this year, you probably couldn't survive.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And definitely being able to create a space of trust. And it starts from the leadership. And as much as leadership says, yes, I have an open door, please come talk with me. When you say that, be careful, because I trust you when you said, please tell me the truth.
Yeah.
This is a safe space. I may not agree with you, but at least let's have a conversation. And if it's something I can change, let's change that. And what I have seen with Salt Lake County and the pivot that Mayor Wilson has done is she has had some listening sessions. And some of them have not been so nice. But she has taken the time to listen to the community and say, what can we do better? What can we do to ensure that when we're serving not only our county employees, but the customers in individual communities, what ways do you need the services delivered to you? How can we best deliver them the way you will utilize them? So being able to listen from a different perspective, it takes a leader to do that.
Yeah, that's
and to be
leadership right
willing.
there. The leader is a listener. That's what I'm
Absolutely,
hearing.
to be a listener. So I have seen the positivity come out of that there's more open dialogue with that people feel more comfortable coming into Salt Lake County. And when you're talking about the government, that's a whole nother conversation. We're talking about trust. But what she is planning to do and what she is doing, showing by example, is that this is a trusted, welcoming place, and we are listening to you, and we're changing how we deliver services to our community the way you want to.
I've loved watching her leadership, and she's learned so much. It can't help but just bless the whole county community. So I think we bring to the table who we are, and also what we learn. And so the last panel that I remember seeing you on was on Juneteenth.
Yeah.
And you shared a little bit about your ethnic background and then how that shapes how you see the world. So maybe you could bring us up to speed on that.
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up in the 90s in Utah County. My mom, I was raised by my mom. Her family's from Mexico. I was born in LA, but we came here. This was kind of Mecca if you were Mormon in the 80s and 90s. So we moved here, and I quickly picked up. You pick up as a kid on things, and I picked up on the term Mexican, that it was not a good term. There was like dirty Mexican, and there were terms that were it was like cherry pickers, a lot of things that we wouldn't even think of saying now. But surprisingly, I'll still, even the term Mexican, I had this is in the last 5 years, I had a friend, a grown man, his wife, and at one point in this dinner conversation, they said, "Are you ever offended when somebody calls you Mexican?" And I thought, why would I be?
It's an accurate description.
Yeah, it's an accurate description. So as a kid, I would say, whenever we got around ethnicity, it's like, you look a little different, It's like, I would say I was Spanish. It was my way of kind of cloaking it, And then you kind of mature and you start to find a pride in who you are and things. So I think for me, it is a little bit of kind of being your whole self. I think now to be able to say, having lived in China and having been a minority there with my kids, they got tired of it. There were days where I'm so sick of the Chinese, and it sounds bad, but what they meant was, we stick out. I had my kids, we would go out, and people would flock and want to touch their nose. They're like, "You have weird noses," and they want to take pictures. And my kids went batty, and it was the first time I was like, "Wow!" I went back to this flashback of a friend of mine that moved out when we moved from Detroit, and he calls me from UVU. This is 2003, and he goes, "Sid," he's like, "I'm here at UVU," and I think it was in that hall where all the flags are.
Yeah,
and he goes, he's like, "I think I'm the only black dude in this whole school." And I go, "Marv, you might be. I don't know. But breathe. You got this." So I don't know. I think I think for me it gives me most of all a pride. I mean, my mother is everything, to me. So there's just a deep sense of pride. There was looking back at stories and finding the story of one of my uncles when he was getting ready to be shipped out for World War II. This comment of writing a letter home, and I have a copy of it on my desk where he says, "I think I'm the only Chicano on the train." And I think what it does for me is at least say, hey, who are the Chicanos on the train right now in this room? And so it's a little bit of awareness, in what I do.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
And we all, I think, really want to understand each other and learn from each other's backgrounds, but it can be hard sometimes to ask those questions. And I loved earlier how you talked about people reaching out to you and saying, "Let's have a conversation." What can people say to you? How can they open that conversation in a way that is inclusive and kind, that feels right to you?
I think anytime we open a conversation knowing that the person across from you has the same challenges as you do, it's all about humanity and building that relationship and going with good intent. I'm not here to pry Emma, but I know there's some challenges going on. Would you be willing to share some information with me? I have been researching, because you got to do the work yourself. Because if I were to walk up to someone because I want to learn a foreign language and someone speaks a foreign language, I'm not going to say, "Can you teach me how to speak that language, please?" I need to do the work myself.
Get yourself a Rosetta Stone and get back.
Yes. So knowing that you have come equipped I have done this research on this. I know about the 6 principles of nonviolence that Dr. Martin Luther King spoke about. I know about the beloved community. Help me understand how I can be an advocate, how I can be an actor or an ally or an accomplice. I truly want to understand this. And that's when you start building relationships. When people come to you sincerely wanting to know, wanting to learn, wanting to assist, then you take that as genuineness, and that is an open door to have that conversation. But do not come to me to say, teach me this. That's not my job.
Right.
That's not my.
Yeah,
I can correct you.
Yes.
I can bring you in when you say something inappropriate, but it's not for me to start from zero to bring you to this new level where you can Google anything, whether it's correct
Whether it's
or not.
accurate or not, but you can do it.
You can find out information and be intentional about finding out that information and being sensitive as well. Because there are some days, I was doing a training the other day with some highway troopers, Utah highway troopers, and I said to them, I said, listen, today ain't the day. I'm not feeling none of this. So I'm just going to put it on the table right now that I am not feeling what I'm about to share with you because of what has transpired within our community on a global stance. And so we paused for just a moment, and I said, now tell me how you feeling because this impacts you as well. And so for 15 minutes, we just talked about feelings and what was going on, and then we got to the training. But I had to acknowledge in the room, we're not here today. We're hurting at this particular moment. I'm hurting. I know you're hurting. Let's just talk about that.
You made it safe for that conversation.
Got to make it safe.
Yeah.
Got to make it safe.
Right.
So yes.
I've got to share one thing
Okay,
that Emma made me think of that it was so good because I think she hits it on the head with do some of your work ahead of it. So my wife was brilliant in this. She graduated from high school in Birmingham, Huntsville, Alabama. Her senior prom was the first non-segregated senior prom. And I was like, no. She's like, yes. I'm like, no, this is 1997. You're kidding me. She goes, yes. So we're married in Birmingham. So we go back for a 20th high school reunion, and she's like, let's take the kids. And we're going to go on a civil rights tour. We're going to start in Huntsville, and we're going to go all the way, through Birmingham, Montgomery, Selma, did the whole bit. It was great. Things that I was educated in the U.S. I did not know Emmett Till, any of his story, surprisingly, shockingly, embarrassingly. I'm sorry, Emma.
Don't be sorry.
You know now.
I know now.
Yes.
But here's what happens. So we're in Birmingham. We're at an original pancake house. And the kids have been educating. We've been doing these walks,
Our mouths started watering.
I look over at this couple, and I'm doing the math based on what I guess their age is. And I walk over just myself. I go, where were you during the civil rights movement? And this gentleman looks at me. He goes, we were both 16. I go, could I bring my kids over, and can you just tell them? So we take our kids. This gentleman's name's Reginald. He sends us a Christmas card to this day every year, you guys. We have a picture in our house that's Birmingham City and Waterworks that he sent us as a Christmas gift, this piece of crystal. So he goes with his wife, and first of all, it's just like they're like their grandkids, and they start talking to him, and they look over and they go, you see over there that bathroom you just went into? We couldn't go in that. We had a different bathroom. That drinking fountain, we couldn't go there. Yes. They were describing to my children, and for my kids, it was the education. They were doing the walks, walking through. They have great, throughout Alabama and the South, just wonderful ways to teach it.
Yes.
The history of civil rights in our country. But for them to see somebody, and now to have done a little bit of work, thanks to my wife Ryan, and now to talk to this couple, and every Christmas now, it is like a level different, where now it's not just, yes, we stand on, Juneteenth or any walk that's in our city. It's there's humans involved. There's people we actually know. And like you say, we all have a similar story. There's some pursuit of the American dream, and whether it's a struggle based on race, unfortunately, or mental health or other things, we're kind of all in this together.
We're in this together.
Yeah.
I wish we could all sit around with Reginald.
Oh, it was so good.
That sounds like the best of
They were the
speech
warmest
making.
couple I've ever met. I mean, it was just too perfect. It was perfect.
Yes.
So getting back to kind of this corporate boardroom type feel. Once we've gathered the diversity, we've made it safe for people, we've had the conversations, all the different thoughts are sitting around the table, and someone brings forth an idea, and we're all going to activate around it. How do you get people who, that's not their idea, that's not how they see things, how do you get everyone on board? What have you seen works to get everybody to understand and move forward on an idea that is not theirs?
So I had kind of two thoughts. Actually, when you were speaking, I was thinking a little bit about this idea of doing work, because it exists in the business world also, right? There is this requirement that says when you're going to bring an idea or you're trying to negotiate or make something happen, that you have to come prepared. And you also have to be willing. So I think there's two sides. There's one about the person presenting. There's the other about the people at the table who have to do the work. And both mindsets have to be there, right? You got to come with your idea and all of these ideas. And then the other people have to be willing to be open to it. So my favorite tactic when I'm ever approached with something that seems impossible, and there are many of these. A couple of years ago, I had built a 3D printing company, right? Jeanette knows as well. You could become like Iron Man or a Jedi. Like we took 3D scans of your face, and you could become any of your favorite characters.
It's very cool.
Who do you want?
Look him up.
That's right.
Very cool company that you ended up selling.
That's right. Ended up selling, but
Everybody wants one of. Everybody wanted and wants one of these.
Exactly.
It's so cool.
It is,
it's
exactly.
So cool.
It's like you can play for your football team or your... it was a really fun company to build, but we had been working for 6 months on this deal, and we had just signed this deal, and it was to launch for holiday with one of the largest retailers in the country. And in order to launch, we needed a really important partner to help us with some of the hardware that was going to the store. And on this Friday night, 2 weeks before launch, they called and told me they were out, that they weren't going to hit the deadlines and they weren't going to do it. And I had signed the contract with the retailer a couple weeks before, and I was launching a Marvel and a Star Wars line. And so they were kind of small companies I was dealing with. And
Never heard of them.
I remember this. We were friends and close. Yeah.
So I show up on Monday morning, and the easiest path is actually just to say, like, forget it, close the book, like, don't move forward. But I turned to the team and I said, I'm asking for a mindset change, which is I want you to write down, I want you to think about everything that we could possibly do to make this happen. And then I want to go after it. So I've tried to employ this tactic of this idea that anything is possible, and I need everyone to play a game for a short amount of time. Because in 30 days from now, or 2 weeks from now, we can just decide to change. But for 30 days, you might think this is the worst idea you've ever had. And I even said that at the beginning of that. I'm like, I know you think I'm crazy. And I'm asking you to do the impossible. And nothing might actually happen, but work with me. Yes. And the team then switched this mindset of like, yeah, it's okay. She might be like out of her mind. But I'm going to go through the list, and we brainstorm like 25 items that required every family and friend member. Short end of the story. We only missed our launch date by 1 day. It did take 150 family members and a lot of work to go and do those. But their mindset changed, and along the way they learned. And I have found continuously, no matter the group of people, because we all have crazy ideas. Sometimes they're bad ideas and sometimes they're good ideas. But what you need are people willing to activate. And so you have to be willing for people to say, you're right, like this, we don't even know if this might be a good idea. Our data says it might be, but how about if we all just go play it for 2 weeks or for 30 days? Because I promise at the end of that time, we will either say, yeah, it was a really bad idea, we should switch, or we'll be like, that was amazing, and everything changed. It's even the way I used to teach Scrum, so, Agile development. People hate Scrum, right? They're like, you're tracking my hour, you're telling me everything I'm supposed to do. So we would say, you're right, this might be a bad way to manage our team, but give us 30 days. And if at the end of 30 days, we are not aligned and it hasn't transformed, we'll just adjust. We'll figure out the things that didn't work. We'll readdress those. If it didn't produce the results, we'll come up with a new plan. But I think as a leader, you have to be willing to just ask people in short amount of time that they can function. If you ask people for things they don't agree with to commit for years, they can't quite do that. But most people want to evolve. And so you give them the freedom to say, I need your input, I need your feedback, but I also need you to just agree to go with us. And then we'll fix it, and we'll address it, and we'll move. And most people will embrace that option.
So what I hear you saying is it's important for the person presenting the idea to flat out ask for support.
That's right.
Use those words.
And even say, you might not agree, but just let's just try it.
Right. And I think it's also on the leader at that table, if there's another leader
for sure,
to ask everyone at the table, let's all support this idea.
That's right.
We're allies and accomplices to that idea.
That's right.
Yes.
Because what you almost always find is some part of the idea was good, and the learning made such a difference by the end of the day. And people will rally behind things that start having success.
Absolutely.
And so it takes someone who's willing to stand, but leadership, I believe all change comes from top down. Right. So if we don't have our leaders at the top who are just saying, you're right, this is what we expect. Like, just come in. You have a great idea. I don't know. Let's try it. Let's do it. And I'm telling you, I've killed many ideas and I've continued many ideas. And that's just fine.
That's the way to get good ideas, is to have a lot of them.
That's right.
And you sort through them.
Yes. And you will see that there will be champions right at the onset of it. And then there will be the ones who are bystanders who will watch to see, and there will be the ones who will say, this too will pass.
Yeah.
We have had that pushback
Yes.
before. But once you get that momentum going, once you get those champions on board, everybody wants to be part of a winning team. They don't want to be left out. So having people at the table, giving their thoughts, giving their solutions, giving their ideas, you have now validated their voices. Because someone who probably would have never spoken up has given you an idea. It's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But because you opened the door, you build that safe, trusted space where they can use their brave, authentic voices, you now have champions on board. We all want to be heard.
Absolutely.
Whether our idea is accepted or not, we want to be heard and at least thought that, okay, that worked,
Right.
or maybe not now, maybe later.
I do think that's a basic human need. We want to be heard.
We want to
no
be
matter
heard.
who we are, no matter what age, what gender, what ethnic background, we all want to be heard.
I think that's an important point. Sometimes we think that what everyone wants is us to say yes to their ideas. But what they really want, even if you don't like their idea, is what Emma just said. They just want you to say, thank you for sharing. That gives us a really great insight. Let's keep having a discussion on that, right? There's really nice ways to decide you might not be activating on that, but that you acknowledge that someone was heard. And most people just want you to say, my goodness, thank you for sharing. That's really great input.
Yes.
Let's all remember that input as we're coming up with the end state.
Right.
Because when you dismiss people and you push back on them, or you don't even give them the empathetic return, that's when you lose everyone. And then that's when all the other people stop contributing.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Have you been around a table where someone throws an idea out there and there's silence? Everyone's just looking at the ground. That shuts everybody down. This isn't a safe space. We're not going to acknowledge what you just said. It's better to say, yes, thank you for your idea, even if you're not going to activate now. But we heard you.
That's right.
Thank you for adding to the conversation.
And I think even in our struggle conversations, there's often times where all people need is to say, like, they need you to say is, I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. Like, what are things that you've thought about that could help? Right? It's in the conversation. It is in the foundation of empathy. It is in the foundation of emotional IQ, which I will just say a lot of people need to work on.
Yes.
Just a little bit.
Just a tiny bit.
It's true, and yet they don't have classes really for that. It's hard to teach emotional intelligence, but it is so important.
Yes.
So as we're winding down in our time together today, we've talked about a lot of things that are going well, things that have progressed, but I'd love to know from each of you, if you had a magic wand, okay, it's 2020, anything could happen. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and fix something related to diversity and inclusion, what would it be? What would that look like? And Emma, we'll start with you and work our way
Oh
around the
my
table.
gosh, what would that look like? I would have a magic wand that we would no longer need to talk about diversity. That would be my magic wand.
Love
that
that.
we see each individual with all of our good things, our bad things, our strengths, we see a person as a person and what they bring to the table, regardless of what they look like exteriorly on the I can't even find the word, on the exterior.
Right. On the outside.
On the outside, thank you, on the outside. But what we bring to the table, it's all about humanity and it's all about relationships, and that there is enough to go around for everyone. Me sharing with you does not take away anything from me.
No.
Not at all. So if I had a magic wand, I would wave it that we would not need to have this conversation.
Because it would be natural.
It would just be
naturally.
natural.
Yes.
Yes.
I like that. Thank you, Emma. Sid.
Yeah, I think it would be, let me caveat it with this. I think that some things in some settings serve us, patriarchy being one. We can appreciate a father who is all the father. You know, it's what I strive to be, candidly. Like, I hope, you know, so patriarchy is one thing. But, you know, I think that we unfortunately ascribe to business some of those things that in other aspects of our life have a place, and in business they don't. And I think if I were to wave the wand, anything would supersede patriarchy. And the few that take the mic and the stand in communities at large, particularly in tech, meaning meritocracy, for one. There are companies bigger and better and faster than the ones most young people in this university settings know about in just this community that we don't hear about, let alone other areas. So, you know, so I think it would be that there is some democratization and this is happening. This happens in sports with things like the Players Tribune. It happens when Cyd, as she, features, or as you feature, you find those stories that need to be told. I think that there are just so many more stories that need to be told, and they will be told, but you would almost hope, and I think this happens subconsciously for all of us, there's times where you strive in your career to hit a point, and when you get there, you're like, well, I ain't moving from this spot. I'm the superintendent of this school district. Yeah, this feels good. But this ability to find joy in others, others' success, and even stage time. I think there's something that's just beautiful about that and satisfying, and so that would be the one thing I would wave the wand on.
All right, thank you. Cyd, the last word, the last magic wand.
Yeah, well, I really appreciated what Emma said too around that. We're on a long journey, but when we don't have to talk about it because we're all better at it, then we will have arrived. But for me, one of the other things that came to mind is, I think one of the magic wands I would wave is this idea of how do you become kinder and less judgmental. Because there's judgment on all sides, right? On all sides coming in. And when you think about how you lift humanity, communities, individual peoples, it comes from this innate sense of, like, I'm not judging you for past things you've done or where you came from or because you don't look like me or you don't think like me or you have, something in your life that I might have been taught, looked down on. We have to have this place of, and that's where true inclusivity comes from, that we're willing just to serve our fellow man because we love them and because we know that lifts the world.
Yes.
And it translates to the corporate world. Right? When you are working and when you work with people who are good people, then you want to work with those people and you want to elevate those people and you want to be with those people who build. And sometimes we don't reward that behavior. Right? But if I had a magic wand, it would be that we lose judgment and that we are truly kinder and more loving, because that will change everything. It changes our responses.
Yes, absolutely.
It changes the way that we are willing to adapt and learn and grow, because that's our job here on this planet and on this earth, is to become better humans.
Yes.
And I don't think you can do that when you sit in a place of, even if I don't agree with you, I judged you and I can't be nice to you.
So good.
I want to live in a world where these magic wands all work.
Me too.
The three of you have a lot of great ideas and have done so much work. Thank you for all the work you've done, all the things you've shared with us today. This has been an awesome conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.